Treatment of children by parents and guardians. A highlight of the different forms of abuse include sexual abuse, emotional maltreatment, neglect, and physical assault, to mention a few. What are the factors responsible for the rise in cases of child abuse in Nigeria? What are the psychological consequences and impact of abuse on the child and the long-term effect on society? Our correspondent Ronami is standing by with answers to these and more.
Statistics indicate that 6 out of every 10 children experience some sort of violence, while 25% of girls, that's 1 in every 4 girls, and 10% of boys have been victims of sexual violence. According to the United Nations International Children Emergency Fund, UNICEF, violence against children occurs in homes, families, schools, churches, communities, and other places where children should feel safe.
You have enumerators go out to the field to interview physical children, physical parents, to ask them questions on exactly what they experienced, and that's how we came about that information. So it's not a cooked up. It's not a cooked up data. It's verifiable, and if you ask me whether it's gone up or it's gone down, it's gone worse.
Well, child abuse, to me, is doing things that are wrong to a child. That's undermining her, him or her, maybe because it's he or she's a minor.
Well, it's a crazy state of messing up a young person who is less than 18, who is yet to walk into adulthood, and who is not supposed to do things on his own, and is being abused or perhaps being subjected to untold hardship by a major person, that's a senior person.
Child abuse in essence of, like, let's assume, for example, the child that is not up of the age, allowing the children to be walking around, selling some things they are not supposed to do, and learning some things they are not supposed to. Meanwhile, they are supposed to be in school.
So it is very sad. I was trying to grasp the dynamics of this kind of evil that had come upon the nation.
Spare the rod and spoil the child. A popular quote used by almost every Nigerian parent or caregiver. Nigerian parents are so famous for being strict that the internet is riddled with comedy skits and memes of how tough they are. Research confirms that the high rates of child abuse in Nigeria can be linked to various social factors and cultural predispositions like religion, traditional beliefs, child labor, and the use of violent discipline on children.
That if I'm convulsing, it means there's an evil being within me. You understand? If the child is being abused, and he expressed it, is a sign of disrespect to the adults. If a child is being abused and we confront the woman abusing him or the man abusing her, it is an insult. It is a taboo to the name of our family. So due to that, we rather just cancel it or nullify it or put it under the carpet. And one thing under social psychology that we need to understand is attribution, the way we explain behaviors. We have internal attribution and external attribution. There's a high tendency for us to attribute things to a superior being, which is God, the devil, and so on, when we don't have a good explanation for it. Why did you do it? I don't know. It is the devil. You understand? Why did the child behave like that? Oh, he's possessed. But nobody will understand that the child is probably experiencing, the child has actually experienced trauma. And what we are seeing now is as a result of the trauma that the child is going through.
I think the best way for us to correct our children at home is to advise them, sit them down, talk to them, be friendly to them, so that they can be able to give you what they have in them.
Everything is not something that you will use cane. You will call your daughter or your son. Talk to your son in a manner of the way that she's your friend, he's your friend.
Cane appears to have been legalized, but people tend to use it, over-dramatize the use of the cane. Personally, I'm against the use of cane physically as a punishment. I talk to the child. I may be annoyed with you. I shout and run, but I can never use a cane on my child.
Hurt people tend to hurt others. And while violent punishments and the like have always been the norm in Nigerian homes and schools, research has shown that although an unpleasant experience for these children, some of them continue the cycle of abuse with their own children or children in their communities.
Like that. We have men or ladies that they have esteem issues or personality issues or other paraphilic disorders that are the thing that are as a result of the things they experience while growing up. So what I'm trying to say is that most people that engage in abusive behaviors, either abusing a child or abusing their partners or abusing people around them, most of them have experienced, traumatic events while growing up.
Abuse is, however, not limited to physical violence alone. Neglect and emotional abuse can be just as harmful and traumatic for the child, often manifesting itself in their behavior.
One of the ways is in terms of the behaviors of the child. We're not even talking about academics this time around. The instance or the actual behavior of the child. There'll be reaction, there'll be ways the child will be reaction to issues in the environment. We have children that they can actually perceive the behavior from the other individual, from the older individual, and they can actually speak to that individual, because you can see some children that they will just say some things and be like, oh really, how did you know that, how did you observe that? And there's some children that, most children actually, they often keep quiet about issues like this, but they are fighting it and battling with it within themselves. And that is why we see children that they just keep quiet. We see children that they develop behaviors like anger issues, but you don't really know why they are actually angry. We have children that they can start moving into the group of behaviors that we call intellectual disabilities. They can start moving into that. And depersonalization and dissociative disorder, they are the future form of disorder that these children can go through later in life. We call it dysfunctional home.
Cultural beliefs remain by far the main justification for violence against children in this part of the world, especially when it comes to girls. There are practices that not only endanger but outrightly violate young girls on many fronts. For example, Nigeria currently has the third highest number of women and girls who have undergone female gender mutilation worldwide, and the most child brides, with over 23 million girls and women from poor or rural families being married off as children. Experts say the number of child brides could increase by more than 1 million by 2030 and probably double by 2050.
We call it social norms, things that people just accept, that they don't want to change, and there's nobody to change it. Look at FGM. If you dig deep into the FGM and you're talking to people, they will say in Yoruba, Ashe Baba Wani, meaning that this is what we met our fathers doing. So we're not looking at what is happening today. So what I'm trying to say is the issue is, it's traditional, it's social, it's what we call the social norms, where you have ingrained behaviors that needs to be changed. And in these days and time, I believe that we can change it. We're talking about it, raising issues about it, putting it on the faces of people, letting people know the effect. So if the fathers of old did it in their ignorance, we cannot afford to perpetrate that kind of level of ignorance.
You see, it is reprehensible for you to say someone who is 10 years old should get married. For what purpose? For what reason? One, she's not prepared for it. Secondly, she's not matured enough. Thirdly, it is the worst form of slavery for you to adopt a baby of that age into marriage. Literally, you are just sentencing her to her early death.
It is too small. At least with the marriage, from 25, 30 to me. Because as a man, I married when I'm above 30. So I can't allow my child. What I did not do, I won't want my child to do.
Can you imagine the trauma that child, let's assume the child is, giving out around the age of 11. So the 7 years of trauma, do you know what that means? Already anxiety is a way of life for her. Low moment anxiety is a way of life for her. Low self-esteem is a way of life for her. Low self-worth and self-confidence is normal for her.
The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children states that all children have a right to protection from abuse and exploitation. In fact, most countries have child protection policies in place, But the stigma sometimes attached to abuse oftentimes means a lot of these incidents go unreported.
I'll give an example of this woman lost her husband, got married to another man. The man started abusing her daughter. Now, she's a widow. Well, she was unmarried. Then she got this man to marry her, to give her a cover, to give her a home, to give her something to live with. The same man abusing her daughter. The question is, where does she go to? Where does she start from gathering her life together? So they had a family meeting and they said, hey, let's keep it in the family. And that's how they kept it in the family. I don't know what became of that girl, but we hear of this kind of story. They say, let's keep it in the family. People are not ready to fight it. The court system is not sophisticated enough to give justice. The social economic situation is not strong enough to help women who are in this situation.
Trauma will always leave a mark, and these scars more often than not remain with these children forever. The big question on the lips of many is, how effective is the child rights law? While some insist that implementation of existing laws remains critical to protecting children from abusive circumstances, others insist that sensitization and civic education may just be the magic wand needed to mitigate this societal challenge.
Thank you, Ronemi. Now, moving on. In our next report, Victor Azu looks at the Child Rights Act and the laws that protect children from abuse. What is the level of awareness or ignorance of Nigerians of the laws against child abuse, the punishment for defaulters, and implementation? What areas of the Act needs review? And should there be stiffer punishment for perpetrators of child abuse? Victor, is all yours.
Somewhere in Africa, back home in Nigeria, it has been 30 years since countries across the world adopted the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Yet, to date, its objectives of protecting children remain far from reality in many countries, including Nigeria. After years of complex negotiations, Nigeria passed the Child Rights Act in 2003, but for UNICEF Child Rights Specialist Sharon Oladiji, this hasn't made a telling difference in the country's child rights protection records.
We have a long way to go. If you unpack what is the child rights law, there are 4 components. There are 4 baskets of rights. We have participation, where you listen to your children. The issue of listening to our children is a lot of, especially from where I came from, a child is a child, shouldn't be hurt, can be seen. The participation rights for the child, listening to the child, counseling the child, helping the child to grow, demonstrating good things to the child. We have a lot to do in our homes. Let's take the next one, development. Development has to do with education. What do you expose your child? What kind of education are you giving to your child? Well, in this situation where we are too dependent on the internet, how do we protect our children? From what they see in the internet, how do we protect them from pornographic materials? And I want to tell you, a lot of children are exposed to pornography. When you now talk about protection has to do with violence against children, abuse of children, the child labor. All these are under, the child justice issues. All these are under protection issues. And you agree with me, the issue of violence against children has been with us for so long, and it's not going. The way we violated the rights of children, the sexual molestation, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, all these are in the act that we should not be doing to our children, and we're doing it. Survival of children, when you have a baby or when you get pregnant, take care of your pregnancy, go for antenatal, deliver in hospital, immunize your child. These are all under survival issues. Birth registration, when you give birth, register, all these are under survival rights.
The major problems that we have is 1, the parents themselves, 2, enforcement. When I say enforcement, I'm talking about generally and holistically the criminal justice system itself. where sadly you find people within the enforcement community, you find even judges who actually think that some of these issues that relate to marriage should be a combination of the law, customs, and tradition of a given society.
The law was designed to align the country with the provisions of the convention by expanding the human rights bestowed on citizens in Nigeria's 1999 constitution to children. The act deals with a range of threats that a child might face, including child labor and other forms of exploitative practices. Although this law was passed at the federal level, many say it is only effective if state assemblies also codify the law. So far, 25 out of 36 states of Nigeria have adopted the Child Rights Act as a state law. 11 other states are yet to do same. Nigeria has also passed other non-specific child laws that protect children, like the Labour Act and the Trafficking Act. Despite these additional statutes, huge gaps remain.
The Child Rights Act is a very comprehensive law, and it's something that we as a country should celebrate as always. Now, interestingly, the standards that have been set by the Child Rights Act are very high, and that is something that is good for our children. But it's also those same standards that have made law enforcement agencies to avoid it, because they think that the standards are too high, and they've not come to terms with the fact that we need to protect our children at the very highest level.
Another reason adduced is that the Child Rights Act does not resonate with the ordinary Nigerian.
Some of these statutes and laws are not popular. A lot of people don't know that children have rights. Why do we engage in our children in exploitative labor? Why do we traffic children? In Nigeria, you will notice that even adoption, which is a healthy practice of bringing up children, is thoroughly abused.
Indeed, many advocates of child rights do so from the point of passion and not necessarily knowledge of the law. For the Nigeria Governors' Wives Forum, it is a combination of passion and maternal instinct.
We have the Nigerian Governors' Wives Against Gender-Based Violence. We also have all our various other groups that, as we all meet. And obviously the right of the child and, children's issues primarily, are something that we work on. Also gender issues, because at the end of the day, when you see that children are abused or people are abused in the country, to a large extent it's still primarily females. So while you are taking care of the child, it's also something that you begin to see that it dovetails into gender issues and gender rights. So definitely this weighs on our mind. Definitely we're doing a lot that we can about it. This is why we're pushing for all the laws that can be enacted to be enacted. We remain a pressure group to make sure that these laws get enacted. We talk to the governors, we talk to the state houses of assembly, all these people, Attorney General, everybody, the police, and then civil society organizations. Most of us own our own NGOs as well. Like for mine is the Ajike People Support Center. And we make sure that we use this platform as well, outside of just being first ladies, to work on all these issues.
This sort of pressure needs to be sustained, yet that may not suffice. What more needs to be done to shore up Nigeria's child rights protection records?
We need fathers. We need role models. From the home, we can't even blame government for starters. We have dysfunctional families. We have children we are born, we've given birth to, we don't care for. We don't know. We don't even want to know how these children will grow. We just give birth to children. We don't plan for them. So for me, home is the place to start from. Role model of fathers that will hold the hands of their children and show them the way. We lack it.
Nigerians need to be aware of the provisions of that act, so that when you are engaging in acts of abuse, you are aware that these are the provisions and these are things that you should not be doing. Now, we also notice there is lack of political will. We need our leaders not just paying lip service to promoting the rights of children. We should make real the rights of children. So we need to begin to create a lot of awareness about the statutes, about the way children should be treated.
Any act whatsoever in a sexual nature involving an adult and a child automatically in the Child Rights Act translates to rape and attracts a minimum punishment of life imprisonment. Many law enforcement agencies think that is too harsh, so they tend to avoid the Child Rights Act when dealing with issues of child molestation, especially with sexually related issues. But that's not good, because it is deliberate when the National Assembly adopted and enacted that law for the purpose of ensuring that children be seen as objects that need to always, at all times, be protected.
Children are a gift to us by the Almighty God. Both by our culture and by the law, a child is presumed to lack the mental capacity and even the physical capacity to protect himself or herself. So therefore, this is entrusted into our hands. Sadly, you find that we breach this trust. So therefore, I think the media has a role to play in terms of enlightening the people. I will also commend the media. The recent increase in people coming forward to even report abuses, to even report abuse ranging from rape to assault, is because the media is now amplifying some of the stories.
Child punishment to the level where it becomes total abuse was going on, and we had a symposium in Kwara where we brought, stakeholders together, and we said, listen, you have to do more to make sure that the right people are listening and are hearing. Parents, teachers, those who are in charge of the children need to really get this message on board that it's not right to beat a child into a coma. It's not right to abuse children to that level. And it's not right to, some people take punishments to the extra mile and do so much damage to the child. And you see that these things the children carry with them for a very long time, as memories, as flashbacks. Some people actually exhibit the signs of PTSD, what we call post-traumatic stress syndrome. And they need to be, counseled.
Notwithstanding, observers are of the view that the vulnerabilities of children and their susceptibility to exploitation, for example through child marriage, demand more sustained efforts. Pressure should continue to be exerted on the 11 states that have yet to reenact the Child Rights Act to take the best interest of children into account. Nigeria's Labour Act and the Trafficking Act could offer some protection to children across the country, especially in the areas of child labor and child trafficking, if sufficiently implemented.
Child maltreatment remains a major public health and social welfare problem in many countries, Nigeria inclusive. Experts insist that protecting the child from various forms of abuse is a responsibility of all. They note that bequeathing to generations unborn a culture of respect for human rights, and more so for the vulnerable children who are the leaders of tomorrow, is a step in the right direction. This can be achieved with proper societal structures and commitment from all and sundry, including you and me. That's the program this week. Join us again next week for another edition. I'm Lydia Samson.
Nigeria is blessed with arable land and lush vegetation. Every season, the agricultural sector harvests various